Daniel crossed his arms, defensive. I was tired of living in your shadow, always being overshadowed by your perfect scores and your arrogant pride. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough. I didn't even know how to respond. My heart was broken, not just because of the betrayal, but because this was coming from someone I had trusted and cared about. Chapter 1. I grew up surrounded by luxury, the kind that most people only dream of. My family's wealth, the blooming businesses in every sector. You name it, we had it. As the only daughter, I was always treated like a princess, but I never wanted that life to define me. I've always craved something simpler, something more meaningful. So when I enrolled in one of the top universities in the country, I made a decision. No one would know who I really was. I left behind the designer clothes, the fancy cars, and all the attention that came with being Emma, the heiress, and I became just Emma, another freshman on campus. It didn't take long for people to notice me, though. No matter how hard I tried to blend in, my looks seemed to draw attention wherever I went. By the end of my first semester, people had already started calling me the campus beauty. I hated the label at first, but soon enough, it became impossible to avoid. I think what really surprised people was that I wasn't just the pretty girl they thought I was. I loved studying, and I took my academics seriously, especially because of my dream to become a neurosurgeon. Every test, every lecture, every sleepless night spent poring over books, I gave it my all. And it paid off. My name was always at the top of the scoreboards, which only seemed to fuel the gossip. They started calling me the BB Princess, beauty with brains. I can't say I hated that one as much. It wasn't easy, though. Everyone either envied me or put me on a pedestal, like I was something to admire from afar. But honestly, I just wanted to be seen for who I am, a girl with big dreams, not the privileged daughter of some wealthy family. Thankfully, my professors saw that. They noticed my passion, and by the time I was in my second year, they even offered me a position as a teaching assistant. It was a huge honor, and I felt like I was finally being recognized for my hard work, not just my looks or my last name. I'm not here to live up to anyone's expectations but my own. I'm chasing my dream, and I won't stop until I'm exactly where I want to be. Chapter 2. In my second year as a teaching assistant, life at the university became more demanding, but I loved every minute of it. Balancing my own studies with helping others was a challenge I thrived on. One evening, a group of my classmates invited me to the freshman welcome party. I wasn't really one for parties, but I thought it might be a good opportunity to relax a little and meet new faces, so I decided to go. The party was lively, filled with laughter, loud music, and an air of excitement that always comes with the start of a new academic year. I found myself mingling with a few friends when my attention was caught by someone standing off to the side, sipping his drink quietly. He wasn't the type to blend in. He had a well-built frame that suggested he spent a lot of time training or playing sports, yet there was something in his demeanor that seemed reserved, almost shy. It intrigued me. After a while, I wandered over and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Emma," I said, offering a smile. He glanced up a little surprised, but returned the smile. "Daniel," he replied. He wasn't much for small talk, but as soon as I mentioned I was a neuroscience major, his eyes lit up with interest. We quickly found ourselves deep in conversation about the brain. How fascinating it was that such a small organ could control everything, from our thoughts and emotions to movement and memory. We discussed neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to adapt and reorganize itself. He was particularly curious about how neural connections are strengthened through learning, and I share my thoughts on the latest studies showing how even after injury, the brain can rewire itself. I could tell he wasn't just making conversation to be polite. He was genuinely intrigued, asking insightful questions, and offering his own thoughts. I found out that Daniel was a freshman, studying the same major as me, neuroscience. Like me, he was fascinated by the complexity of the human brain and how much we still had to learn about it. He talked about how he wanted to specialize in neurodegenerative diseases, focusing on finding treatments for conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. His passion for understanding how the brain could break down and, more importantly, how it could potentially be repaired was evident in the way he spoke. The more we discussed our shared field of study, the more I realized how deeply invested he was in making a difference in the world of neuroscience. It wasn't just a career path for him, it was a calling just like it was for me. The more we talked, the more comfortable he became, and by the middle of the night, the shy guy I had first seen standing alone was laughing and joking with me like we had known each other for years. His dry sense of humor matched my own, and we found ourselves talking about everything from the ethics of neural implants to which professor gave the hardest exams. The night flew by, and before I knew it, the party was winding down. As we stood outside, the crisp night air reminding me how late it had gotten, Daniel looked at me, a slight smile on his face. "I really enjoyed tonight," he said. "Maybe we could continue this conversation sometime?" I smiled back. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and as we each went our separate ways, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I wasn't sure what, but I knew that meeting Daniel had been more than just a casual conversation at a party. It felt like the beginning of something what I didn't know yet, but I was curious to find out. Chapter 3. Though Daniel and I had exchanged numbers after that night, we didn't really talk much afterward. Without the influence of alcohol, I wasn't the type to casually chat with guys, and knowing Daniel's shy nature, he didn't reach out either. Our lives carried on, busy with classes, labs, and other responsibilities. We never really had the chance to interact again until the neuroscience debate competition came around. The competition was a big deal, open to students from all years majoring in neuroscience, and only the top students from each year would form a 4-person team to represent our university at the national debate competition. I was thrilled to be selected, but what surprised me even more was seeing Daniel's name on the list. Knowing how passionate he was about neuroscience, I felt a sense of relief to have someone I'd spoken to before on the team. His quiet determination reassured me that we had a strong comrade by our side. As we began preparing for the debate, I got to know Daniel more closely. We worked long hours, studying complex topics, discussing strategies, and practicing our presentations. He was still reserved, but the more time we spent together, the more I saw how dedicated he was. His mind was sharp, his ideas clear, and his love for neuroscience matched mine. We both gave our best efforts, along with the other 2 team members, to make sure we'd be ready for the big day. When the day of the debate arrived, I was overwhelmed with excitement. The thought of standing on that stage, not only representing my team, but also my university and state, filled me with pride. This was more than just a competition. It was an opportunity to share our beliefs and findings with senior and peer neuroenthusiasts alike. Daniel, however, seemed different. I noticed his nerves starting to show, and honestly, it worried me. I knew how much this moment meant to him, and I didn't want his anxiety to overshadow his talent. Most of the time, I ended up presenting for our team, mainly because of my confidence and ability to speak on a wide range of topics. I was honored to be the voice of our team, and while the 3rd and 4th year students presented topics from their syllabi, I often took on the advanced level topics I had studied on my own. But when it came to Daniel's turn to present, I refused to step in, even when the team suggested I could. He may have only been a freshman, but he was chosen for a reason, and I didn't want to take away his one chance to prove himself. As I watched him walk onto the stage, my heart was racing. I could tell he was nervous, but the moment he started speaking, it was like a switch flipped. The shy, reserved guy I knew transformed into someone completely different. His voice was confident, his points sharp and clear, and the passion with which he presented his topic on neural circuits and their role in memory formation made it seem like he had been working in the field for years. It wasn't just a good presentation, it was remarkable. His confidence and command of the material made it seem as though he had invented the concept himself. I was impressed, more than I could have ever imagined. Daniel wasn't just a quiet freshman anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with, and I felt proud, not just of him, but of our entire team. We were making a name for ourselves, and I knew this was only the beginning. The results were about to be announced, and for the first time all day, I started to panic. The competition had been tough, especially against the team from the 2nd top university. Though they struggled with teamwork during the debate rounds, their individual performances were outstanding. I couldn't understand why they weren't in sync as a team, but the strength of their members had us all on edge. In the midst of my thoughts, I heard my name being called, snapping me back to reality. I had won the individual round. A rush of excitement shot through me, and before I knew it, I had jumped from my seat, my heart racing with joy. Without thinking, I hugged Daniel, the closest person to me, before I dashed to the stage to accept my award. I could barely contain my happiness as I returned to my seat, my team cheering and congratulating me. Next came the third-year results, but we lost that round. My heart sank a little, but I quickly brushed it off, knowing there was still more to come. When the fourth-year results were announced, our senior won, and I was clapping and cheering for him when something hit me. Before my results had been announced, the first-year results had been declared, and it seemed Daniel hadn't won. I glanced at him, seeing the way he clapped for our senior with a bitter smile on his face. My heart ached for him. I could tell he was trying to be positive, but I knew how much this meant to him. As I was thinking of a way to comfort him, the moment we had all been waiting for came. The team results. Our university's name was called. We won the team debate. I turned to Daniel with a smile, and the shock on his face quickly transformed into pure happiness. Together, we rushed to the stage to receive our trophies. The pride and excitement I felt were unmatched, and I could see that, despite his earlier disappointment, Daniel was beaming too. Later that night, we went to a celebratory party with the team. The energy was high, everyone laughing and reliving the best moments of the competition. I found myself next to Daniel, who still seemed a bit down despite the win. I leaned over to him and said, "You know, you did great today. I saw the way you presented, and honestly, it was amazing. You have nothing to feel bad about." He looked at me, a little surprised. "Thanks," he said, his smile soft but genuine. "I just wish I could have won the individual round. But I'm really happy for you and for the team." I nudged him lightly. "Don't be so hard on yourself. You were up there, competing with people who had more experience, and you held your own. That's something to be proud of. And besides, you completely blew me away with your presentation." Daniel glanced down for a moment, a small, thoughtful smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I was disappointed at first," he admitted, his voice quiet. "But honestly, it didn't last long. When you hugged me after you won, it kind of made everything feel better." I froze, suddenly feeling a wave of embarrassment wash over me. I had hugged him without even thinking, caught up in the moment, but now that he'd brought it up, the realization hit me. My cheeks warmed, and I looked away, trying to hide my flustered expression. "I didn't even realize I did that," I stammered, feeling the sudden awkwardness creeping in. "It was just the excitement, you know?" Daniel chuckled softly, clearly amused by my sudden shyness. "Yeah, I figured. But still it meant a lot." I could feel my heart racing, unsure of what to say next. The hug had been spontaneous, but now it felt like something much more significant. I found myself sneaking a glance at him, and for a brief moment, we locked eyes. His expression was soft, genuine, and it left me feeling unexpectedly shy in a way I hadn't before. As the night went on, we kept talking, drinking a little more than we probably should have. I wasn't much of a drinker, but the buzz in the air was infectious, and soon enough, I found myself giggling and blurting out, "You know, I was really impressed with you on stage. I don't think I've ever seen someone transform like that. You looked so confident. It was kinda amazing, actually." There was a silence. I expected Daniel to thank me or brush it off like he usually did, but instead, I heard him mutter, his voice slightly slurred, "I think you're amazing too, senior." I blinked, caught off guard by the vulnerability in his voice. He wasn't his usual reserved self, and I could hear him struggling to get the words out. "Honestly, I've always thought that. Ever since the first time I saw you at that party, I think I fell in love with you that night." My heart skipped a beat. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard him right. But before I could say anything, before I could even react, he slumped forward, completely passed out from the alcohol. Chapter 4. I sat there for a moment, processing what he had just said. Did he really mean it? Or was this just the alcohol talking? Seeing that he wasn't going to wake up anytime soon, I decided to help him back to his dorm. One of our seniors helped me carry him, and we left him safely in his room. As I made my way back to my own dorm, my mind was racing. His confession played over and over in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything between us had just changed. But I had no idea what to make of it. All I knew was that tomorrow, things would never be the same. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying Daniel's drunken confession, and I couldn't stop wondering, was he serious? Or was it just the alcohol talking? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his slurred voice telling me he had fallen for me at the party. A part of me wanted to brush it off as nothing, but another part kept asking, what if he really meant it? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, debating with myself. Did I feel something for him too? I had never thought about it before. He was sweet, quiet, and so passionate about neuroscience. I admired that. But more than that, I realized I had come to enjoy our time together. During the competition prep, talking to him felt natural, easy. He made me laugh, and I found myself looking forward to our study sessions. Was that just friendship? Or was there something more? I wasn't used to this, questioning my feelings about a guy. I had always been so focused on my studies, on my goals, that I never really considered romance. And yet here I was, wondering if there could be something more between us. Well, it's the first time I got close to a guy and actually enjoyed talking to him. I muttered aloud, almost to myself, but loud enough for my roommate to hear.
Who?
Daniel, my roommate, Leah, piped up from across the room. I shot up in bed, my heart skipping a beat.
What?
How did you know I was talking about him? I asked, startled. Leah smirked as she sat up, pulling the blanket over her knees. Oh, come on. Everyone's noticed. While you guys were preparing for the competition, you were practically inseparable. People were even saying you two were dating. Wait, what? My eyes widened in shock. Rumors? About me and Daniel? No, that's definitely not true. I rushed to deny it, waving my hands in front of me as if that would erase the thought. Leah raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my reaction. So, it's not real then? I hesitated for a second, my eyes drifting over to the trophy sitting on my desk. Yeah, definitely not, I mumbled softly. The next day, I was trying to get through my usual routine, classes, labs, and study sessions, but my mind was still muddled by the events of the previous night. Just as I was packing up my books after a lecture, I saw Daniel approaching, looking hesitant. His usual calm demeanor seemed replaced with nervousness, and I knew immediately why he was here. Hey, he started, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Can we talk for a second? I nodded, feeling my heart beat faster, and we walked over to a quieter corner of the campus. He glanced at me, clearly anxious, as if he was searching for the right words. Listen, he said after a moment, his voice quieter than usual. I've been thinking about last night, and I'm worried that I said something that might have upset you. He looked at me, his eyes full of concern. Did I make you uncomfortable? I sighed softly, trying to keep my emotions in check. Daniel, you didn't upset me. But you did surprise me. He seemed relieved, but only for a moment. The nervousness quickly returned as he shifted on his feet, glancing away briefly before meeting my eyes again. About what I said about how I feel. He paused, taking a deep breath. I know it came out of nowhere, and maybe it wasn't the best time to say it, especially with all that was going on. But I meant it. His words hung in the air between us, and I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I knew I had to respond, and I had to be honest with him, no matter how hard it was. I looked him in the eye, my expression serious, but tinged with sadness. Daniel, I respect you so much. You're an incredible person, and I'm grateful for everything we've shared, especially during the competition. But I can't accept what you're offering right now. He blinked, clearly taken aback, his face falling slightly as he tried to process my words. Why? He asked softly, though I could tell he already had an idea. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I need my focus right now. My studies, my goals, becoming a neurosurgeon is everything I've worked for. I can't afford to get distracted, not at this point in my life. And if I let myself consider anything beyond that, I'm scared I won't be able to give it my all. He stayed silent for a moment, his expression conflicted, and I could see the disappointment in his eyes. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to complicate things for you. I needed to be honest." He looked away, as if gathering his thoughts, before turning back to me with a faint, forced smile. "I guess I just hoped things might be different." The sadness in his eyes mirrored the ache in my chest, but I couldn't waver. This was my path, and I had to stay committed to it. "I'm really sorry, Daniel," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You deserve someone who can give you the attention and care you deserve. But right now, I can't be that person." He nodded again, the silence between us growing heavier. After a few long moments, he took a step back. "I get it," he said, his voice barely holding steady. "Forget I said anything. I didn't mean to put you in this position." He gave me a tight-lipped smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes, and added, "Let's just pretend none of this happened." Before I could say anything else, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling more conflicted than ever. As he disappeared into the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that things had irreversibly changed between us.
Chapter 5.
The semester was drawing to a close, and with it, the bittersweet graduation day for our senior, who had been such a crucial part of our national debate team. He was leaving to pursue his PhD abroad, and we all wanted to give him a proper farewell. I knew Daniel would be there, too. Things between us had been awkward since his confession, but I couldn't avoid him forever. After all, he wasn't the only one I had grown close to. My seniors had become friends, mentors, and the memories we shared were some of the best moments of my university life. I couldn't let awkwardness with Daniel stop me from celebrating. When I arrived at the graduation ceremony, I spotted Daniel almost immediately. He was standing with the group, but his face looked tense, a mix of sadness and worry etched across his features. I hesitated for a moment, but pushed the feeling aside, making my way to congratulate our graduating senior. The group gathered for photos, laughing and sharing stories of the past years. The senior held two beautiful bouquets, one of lilies, my favorite, and another filled with an assortment of vibrant flowers, expertly arranged. I couldn't resist. "Hey, can I borrow the lilies for a picture?" I asked with a grin. "Of course," he said, handing them over with a smile. After taking the photo, I returned the bouquet, but just as I handed it back, he paused, as if he was about to say something. There was an unusual look in his eyes, something meaningful. But before I could ask what was on his mind, Daniel called my name. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, pulling me aside gently. We walked away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the university campus. I could feel the tension in the air, and my heart began to race, sensing where this was headed. He turned to face me, his expression serious, his voice low but steady. "I'm sorry," he began, and I could see the weight of his words on his face. "I've tried to stop thinking about you, but I just can't get you out of my mind. I know what I said before, it might have seemed impulsive or too much, but this time, I want you to know that I mean it." I stood there, silent, unsure of what to say as his words sank in. "I can't help how I feel," he continued, his eyes locked onto mine. "I know you're focused on your studies, and I swear I will never get in the way of that. I'll support you, respect your boundaries, and never ask you to choose between me and your dreams. But I had to tell you because the truth is, I can't imagine my life without you in it." His voice softened as he added, "I promise I'll never cheat on you, never betray your trust, never lie, or do anything to make you cry. Please, just give me a chance." It wasn't a confession fueled by alcohol this time. It was genuine, heartfelt, and filled with a sincerity that made my chest tighten. As I looked into his eyes, I realized something. I had been worrying about him more than I cared to admit. Even when we weren't talking, even when I was trying to focus on other things, Daniel had never left my thoughts. His presence had become something constant in my life, something I hadn't realized I was holding on to until now. I swallowed hard, feeling a whirlwind of emotions inside me. My mind raced with all the reasons I had given before, why I couldn't afford distractions. But the truth was, I had already let him in, hadn't I? Maybe more than I was willing to admit. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with a mixture of hesitation and newfound clarity. "Daniel," I began, my voice soft but sure. "I'm scared. I don't want to get distracted from my goals, but you're important to me too. I've been thinking about you a lot, even when I tried not to. So, maybe I owe it to myself to give this a chance." His eyes widened in surprise, and a smile slowly spread across his face, one of pure relief and happiness. "I can't promise it'll be easy," I continued, "but let's try." He beamed, unable to hide the joy in his expression. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "I won't let you down. I promise." And just like that, in the quiet corner of the university, I realized that sometimes life takes you in directions you didn't plan. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Chapter 6. A whole year had passed since that night, and I still couldn't believe how much had changed. Daniel and I had become inseparable. We had grown closer, sharing not just our love for neuroscience, but our lives outside the classroom as well. Our relationship, though unexpected, had blossomed into something I never thought I needed. From study sessions to late-night walks, every moment with him felt like a perfect blend of comfort and excitement. Our dates were always full of fun, even when they were simple. We went on long walks around campus, exploring hidden spots in the university's gardens, or grabbing ice cream from the local cafe. I'll never forget the time we snuck into the old library late one night during exam week, Daniel laughing as we whispered about random topics instead of studying. It was moments like that, where we could just be ourselves, that made everything feel so easy. On weekends, we'd take trips to the city, exploring art galleries and science museums. Daniel always had a childlike wonder whenever we visited places related to technology or biology. I loved watching his eyes light up, his genuine curiosity spilling out as he explained things to me, even though most of it I already knew. But hearing him talk about his passions never got old. It made me fall for him even more. When his birthday came around, I planned a small surprise party with his close friends, knowing how shy he could be about big celebrations. He was genuinely touched, and I'll never forget the look on his face when I gave him his gift, a rare, vintage book on neuroscience that he had been eyeing for months. His smile, wide and full of gratitude, made the effort worth it. And for my birthday, Daniel went above and beyond, taking me to a beautiful rooftop restaurant with a view of the entire city, the sky lit with twinkling stars. It was magical, and it felt like we were in our own little world, just the two of us. Academically, Daniel had his struggles. Though brilliant, he often doubted himself, especially when it came to the tougher courses. I became his study partner, helping him tackle the more difficult parts of our coursework. We spent countless hours in the library, reviewing topics and preparing for exams. Sometimes, I would tease him about how distracted he got when we studied together, but in truth, I admired his determination. He worked so hard, and I could see how much he wanted to succeed, not just for himself but for us. I remember the night before one of his big exams. He was pacing back and forth in his dorm, stressed beyond belief. I sat him down, handed him a cup of coffee, and we went over his notes one last time. His nervous energy seemed to calm down as I quizzed him, and by the time he left for the exam the next morning, I knew he'd do well. And he did. He passed with flying colors. There was a certain joy in seeing him grow and gain confidence over the past year. He wasn't the same shy freshman I met at that party. Now, he stood taller, more assured in himself, and I like to think I had played a small part in that transformation. We celebrated our milestones, small and big. Every time Daniel aced an exam or I completed a major research project, we'd go out for dinner or spend a quiet evening watching our favorite movies. He knew how important my studies were to me, and I appreciated how supportive he always was, never asking me to choose between him and my career. Looking back, that year had been a whirlwind of happiness, growth, and learning. Daniel had become my rock, my best friend, and my greatest supporter. We had shared so much laughter, gone on so many adventures, and faced challenges together. It hadn't always been easy, but we made it work, and that made our bond even stronger. Every step of the way, I had helped him, and he had helped me in return. We were each other's balance, and as the months passed, I realized that what we had wasn't just a fleeting romance. It was real. And as I looked forward to what the future held, I couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. Everything was going smoothly between Daniel and me. He had become my anchor, the steady presence in my life that kept me grounded amidst the chaos of my final year. I was neck-deep in projects, assignments, and research, all of which demanded my undivided attention. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed like the perfect, understanding boyfriend. He didn't complain about the lack of time we had together, and I was incredibly grateful for that. His support allowed me to focus fully on my studies, knowing that he was there, patient and unbothered by my absence. Chapter 7. As the final semester approached, it wasn't just me who was feeling the pressure. Daniel was in his third year, and the demands on him were increasing too. This year, something monumental was happening that had the entire neuroscience community buzzing with excitement. A world-renowned company, NeuroCore, known for its groundbreaking research in neurology, announced a global event for emerging neurologists. The event was aimed at giving students and young professionals a platform to share their knowledge, innovations, and theories related to the field of neurology. It was a huge opportunity, with the chance to present in front of industry leaders, and the top projects could even receive funding or internships with the company. Naturally, both Daniel and I decided to take part in it. The event had a strict 3-month deadline to submit final projects and theories. I knew it would be challenging to balance this along with my finals, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. My project was already in motion, a culmination of everything I had learned throughout my years of study. I had been working tirelessly on it, losing sleep and pushing myself beyond my limits, but it was worth it. Then, just a month before the event, my birthday arrived. Daniel insisted we celebrate it together, despite how busy we both were. He had recently moved into an apartment off campus, a cozy place where he could focus more on his studies without the distractions of dorm life. He invited me over, promising a quiet and memorable night just for the two of us. When I arrived, I was taken aback. The apartment was dimly lit, with soft fairy lights strung around the living room, and the table was set with a homemade dinner. Daniel had clearly put in effort to make the night special. He smiled shyly as I walked in, leading me to the table where a small cake sat, my name written in elegant script. The evening was perfect, just us, talking, laughing, and reminiscing about the past year. It felt like a much-needed break from the intense grind of school and research. After dinner, we sat on the couch, sharing slices of cake and watching the city lights from his window. It was a simple celebration, but it was one of the most memorable birthdays I had ever had. As we relaxed, our conversation inevitably shifted towards the NeuroCore event and our projects. I excitedly talked about my research and how I was close to finishing. Daniel listened intently, nodding along as I explained the details. "You know," he said after a pause, "we've always been a good team. What if we submitted your project together as a team? I'd love to be a part of it." I was taken aback by his suggestion. "Daniel, I appreciate the offer, but this is something I've been working on for months. I'm almost done with it, and, well, you've got your own project, right?" He hesitated, his expression growing more complicated. "I do, but I just thought I could help. We've always worked well together, and I know you're swamped with everything. Plus, I could learn a lot from being part of your project." I shook my head gently. "I know you'd be great, but this is something I need to do on my own. It's my hard work, and I've already completed most of it. I wouldn't want to add anything last minute just to accommodate you. I'm sure your project is going to be amazing, too." Daniel gave me a small smile, though I could see the disappointment flicker in his eyes. "Yeah, I get it. You've worked really hard on it. I'll just focus on mine then." I squeezed his hand, feeling a bit guilty. "Thanks for understanding. I really believe in your work, and I'm sure you'll knock it out of the park." The conversation shifted after that, and though Daniel's words were agreeable, there was an underlying tension. I knew he wasn't angry, but it was clear that my refusal had affected him. I hoped it wouldn't linger between us, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that this project meant everything to me. I needed to finish it on my own terms. The night ended with us sitting together in comfortable silence, but as I left his apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that things between us might have shifted, even if just slightly. I told myself it was just the stress of the upcoming deadlines, but a part of me wondered if there was more to it than that. A week before the deadline, I finally submitted my project. It had been an intense few months of hard work, but I was proud of what I had achieved. However, I would have submitted it even earlier had it not been for Daniel. He had fallen seriously ill, and though I was neck-deep in my research, I couldn't just leave him alone. I spent a few days caring for him at his apartment, making sure he had everything he needed, from medications to food, while trying to balance my time between him and my final project. He was appreciative, though I could sense a tension between us since the birthday conversation about our projects. A few days after I submitted my project, I received a shocking notification from the event committee. There were 2 identical projects submitted, one from me and another from a different team at our university. I couldn't believe it. I sat there, staring at the email, trying to process the fact that someone had copied my work. The committee informed me that a meeting would be held to determine whether the 2 projects were from a single team, or if it was a case of academic dishonesty. My heart raced. This couldn't be real. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the office, my stomach in knots. I was expecting a confrontation, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Chapter 8. Sitting across from me were Daniel and a junior girl from our university, a year below him. My eyes widened in disbelief. Daniel? My Daniel? I could feel the ground beneath me crumble as I tried to keep my composure. How could he? I confronted him privately before the official discussion began. "What the hell is going on, Daniel?" I demanded, my voice barely steady. His expression was hard to read, but there was a bitterness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "You always have to be the best, don't you?" he spat. "You couldn't even let me be a part of your project. You had to finish it all on your own. And when I asked to work with you, you rejected me like I was beneath you." I was stunned. You copied my work because I didn't let you join me?" My voice was a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. "Copied?" "No," he sneered. "I've been working on similar ideas. We all study the same material, don't we? It's not my fault if our projects overlap." I felt sick to my stomach. "This is beyond overlap, Daniel. You stole my work." Daniel crossed his arms, defensive. "I was tired of living in your shadow, always being overshadowed by your perfect scores and your arrogant pride. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough." I didn't even know how to respond. My heart was broken, not just because of the betrayal, but because this was coming from someone I had trusted and cared about. The meeting with the university officials began, and both of us were asked to present our sides of the story. In the conference room, the representatives from NeuroCore listened intently. Both Daniel and I were adamant that the project was ours. Daniel, along with the junior girl, claimed that they had been working on it together for months. He presented some unfinished drafts and raw data from failed experiments they had tried before supposedly getting to their final draft. It was detailed and convincing. For a moment, I felt a pang of worry. Had he really worked on something similar? But I wasn't about to back down. I had been consulting with my professor throughout the process, updating him at every stage of my project. I called him as a witness, and he confirmed that I had shown him my progress step by step. Still, even with my professor's support, it wasn't enough to fully convince the NeuroCore representatives. The unfinished drafts Daniel showed raised doubts in their minds. That's when I made my move. I had held back a critical part of my project, the second part of the theory, which I hadn't submitted yet because it wasn't fully polished. But now I knew I had to use it. I presented the second part of my theory, which further elaborated on my research and future plans for it. It was a comprehensive extension that I had been working on privately, and it went far beyond what Daniel had submitted. There was no way he could have copied this, and no one else knew about it except for me and my professor. The room fell silent as I laid it all out. My heart pounded as I explained the intricate details, and by the time I was done, it was clear to everyone who the true owner of the project was. The NeuroCore representatives were impressed. Daniel and the junior girl, on the other hand, looked defeated. They were asked to leave the room while a final decision was made. After a few minutes of deliberation, the committee came to a conclusion. Daniel and his teammate were disqualified from the competition, and not only that, they were banned from any future participation in NeuroCore-sponsored events. Their actions had tarnished the reputation of our university on a global stage, and as a result, both of them were also suspended from the university indefinitely. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also a deep sadness. The boy I once cared for had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now his future was in ruins. He had done this to himself, and there was no going back. As I left the meeting room, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. I had proven myself, but at what cost? The pain of his betrayal lingered, but I knew I had to move forward. This was my victory, one earned through hard work and perseverance, not shortcuts or deceit. Chapter 9. After the investigation, I made the decision to cut all contact with Daniel. I deleted his number, blocked him on all social media, and made sure to avoid any spaces where we might cross paths. There was nothing left to say between us. The betrayal was too deep, and though a part of me still felt sorry for what he had done to himself, I knew I couldn't allow someone like that to remain in my life. As the NeuroCore event approached, I threw myself back into my work. My project had already been submitted and cleared of all suspicion, but now I had to focus on preparing for the presentation in front of some of the brightest minds in neurology. The event itself was a whirlwind. Scientists, professors, and industry leaders from all over the world were gathered, eager to hear new and innovative theories from emerging neurologists. I was nervous but confident, knowing how much effort and passion I had poured into my research. The presentation went off without a hitch, and I could feel the audience's eyes on me as I shared my findings and future developments. When it was finally over, the judges deliberated, and it felt like an eternity before they announced the winner. My name echoed through the hall. I had won. I was overwhelmed with a flood of emotions as I walked up to the stage to receive the award, a testament to all my hard work, determination, and sacrifices. But the biggest surprise came after the event. Representatives from the main company of NeuroCore approached me, offering me a prestigious position within their core research team. They were impressed not only by my project, but also by my dedication and insight. The salary and benefits were beyond anything I could have imagined for someone my age, an opportunity of a lifetime. But I had a condition. I want to pursue my goal of becoming a neurosurgeon first, I stated firmly. I'll commit to the company after I complete my medical degree and specialization. I want to apply the research I do firsthand in the operating room. They were taken aback by my bold request, but after some internal discussion, they accepted. NeuroCore saw my potential and believed in my vision. They agreed to support my dream of becoming a neurosurgeon, with the promise that I'd return to their company afterward. It was the best possible outcome. When I shared the news with my family, they were overjoyed. My parents were proud, and my brother could barely contain his excitement. They immediately began planning a grand celebratory party to mark my success. My family had always been high-profile, and this time, they wanted to celebrate my achievements in a way that involved not just close relatives but also influential figures from across the country, business leaders, politicians, and other elites. The night of the party arrived, and it was everything I had expected and more. Lavish decorations, 5-star catering, and a guest list full of the nation's most powerful people. I walked into the venue, dressed in a gown that shimmered under the lights, looking every bit the heiress I had kept hidden during my university years. For so long, I had lived as a normal student, avoiding the attention that came with being the only daughter of one of the country's wealthiest families. But tonight, there was no hiding. My identity as the heiress was revealed to everyone, and though it felt strange to be in the spotlight for my family's wealth rather than my own achievements, I knew that this was part of who I was. Throughout the night, congratulations flowed, and I was approached by business moguls, academic leaders, and high-ranking officials, all eager to express their admiration for my success at NeuroCore and my future in neurosurgery. In the midst of the party, as I stood beside my family, I realized that this was a turning point. I had worked hard to achieve my goals, and now I had the world at my feet. My family's influence, my own hard-earned accomplishments, and the promising future with NeuroCore, it all aligned perfectly. But most importantly, I had done it all on my terms, without letting anything or anyone distract me from my path. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. This could have been a happy ending to my story, but what came next was unpredictable. Chapter 10. The day after the grand party, as I was still basking in the warmth of my success and the love of my family, Daniel showed up at my apartment, pleading for a second chance. He looked disheveled and desperate, his eyes swollen from what seemed like sleepless nights. "I made a mistake," he stammered, his voice quivering. "I never should have done what I did. I was scared of losing you, of being in your shadow forever. I was weak, I messed up. But I love you, I've always loved you. Please give me another chance. We were perfect together, weren't we?" His words were laced with emotional manipulation, trying to paint himself as the victim of his own insecurities. He went on, saying how lonely he felt, how pressured he was by the world around him, and how everything he did was because he was afraid I would leave him for someone better. I wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't myself. But I promise I'll change. I'll be the boyfriend you deserve. Please, I can't live without you. I was overwhelmed. Despite his betrayal, despite everything that had happened, the part of me that once cared for him was tempted to believe him. I asked for some time to think. He left, hopeful, and I sat in silence, trying to piece together my emotions. Later that evening, as I sat with my thoughts swirling, my roommate, who had always been a quiet observer of my relationship with Daniel, suddenly revealed a heartbreaking truth. "I didn't want to tell you this before because you were so focused on your project," she began cautiously, her voice trembling slightly, "but there's something you need to know about Daniel." I froze, my heart sinking as I listened. She revealed that Daniel and his junior teammate had been in a secret affair for over a year, long before the project theft. The girl, a needy and insecure student from a rural town, had clung to Daniel, always seeking his help with her studies and, eventually, with more. Daniel, he wasn't just helping her with her projects, my roommate continued. He was involved with her. Physically. He even got that apartment for them to meet up in private. My world crumbled as I processed the information. Daniel had used his relationship with that girl to restore his fragile pride, feeling emasculated by my achievements. He had been hiding this affair for months, all while pretending to care about me. The betrayal wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," my roommate added with guilt. "I thought it would distract you from your work, and you were so close to completing your project. I didn't want to hurt you like this." Furious didn't even begin to describe how I felt. The audacity of Daniel to come to me, begging for another chance when all along he had been unfaithful and had betrayed me in more ways than one. He had no shame, no remorse for the damage he caused, only seeking to redeem himself because he had nowhere else to turn. My anger boiled over, but with it came a sense of clarity. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, and I would be the one to make sure of it. I formulated a plan. I texted Daniel, asking him to meet me, telling him that I was ready to talk. Chapter 11. When we met, I handed him a package. Inside were documents and records that detailed everything he had done during the NeuroCore event, proof of his theft, his deceit, and his own confession in a security footage of the conversation we had before going to the office, when I first learned of his betrayal. His face turned ashen as he flipped through the pages, realizing the gravity of the evidence. "You thought you could get away with it, didn't you?" I said, my voice icy. "Well, you're wrong. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. NeuroCore, the university, every company in the field. You won't get another chance to ruin anyone else's future." Daniel looked at me, stunned, his expression shifting from anger to fear. You can't do this. I'll be blacklisted. My career will be over." "That's the point," I replied coldly. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everyone who believed in you. Now you'll face the consequences." And I followed through with my promise. Within days, the documents were made public. NeuroCore immediately blacklisted Daniel and the junior girl from any future opportunities, both in the company and in any of its partner organizations. The university suspended them for academic dishonesty and for damaging its reputation in a global event. Their degrees were withheld, and without a degree, no company in the field would even consider hiring them. But it didn't stop there. When my family found out about what Daniel had done, they made sure to ruin any remaining prospects he had. My family had influence, and they used it to ensure that Daniel's name was tarnished beyond repair. No one wanted to be associated with him, not in academia, not in business, not anywhere. Even the university he transferred and barely got accepted thanks to his past study records suspended him without any valid reasons. I watched from afar as his life unraveled, his future crumbling before him. It should have made me feel something, pity, sadness, even satisfaction, but all I felt was peace. I was finally free of him and the toxic relationship that had held me back. This was my closure. I had succeeded on my own, stood tall through every obstacle, and now, the man who had tried to tear me down was the one falling apart. Epilogue. Years had passed, and life was finally falling into place for me. After the chaos surrounding the NeuroCore event and everything that transpired with Daniel, I had dedicated myself fully to my career. I completed my studies, earned my medical degree, and began my residency to become a neurosurgeon. My success with NeuroCore skyrocketed, and my theories were being implemented in cutting-edge research projects across the globe. I was being hailed as a prodigy, and life couldn't have been more fulfilling. I traveled the world, spoke at conferences, and helped shape the future of neurology. My family was proud of me. Despite the reveal of my identity as the heiress to one of the country's richest families during that celebratory party, I continued to build a name for myself in my own right. The money, the connections, the prestige, none of it mattered as much as my passion for neurosurgery. And I was succeeding beyond my wildest dreams. Yet, even with all this success, a small part of me had remained closed off, scarred by what had happened with Daniel. That betrayal had left me cautious, wary of letting anyone get too close again. Love had taken a backseat to my work, and I was fine with that, until one fateful day when someone from my past resurfaced. It happened during a prestigious medical conference where I was invited as the keynote speaker. I had just finished my talk when I spotted a familiar face in the crowd, my senior from university, the one who had worked with Daniel and me during the debate competition all those years ago. He was taller now, more confident, and carried an aura of success. As I approached him, a flood of memories washed over me. "Michael?" I called out, half in disbelief. He turned and smiled, the same warm smile I remembered from our time as teammates. "It's been a long time," he said, stepping closer. We spent the rest of the evening catching up. He told me that after his graduation, he had worked relentlessly, becoming one of the most sought-after neurosurgeons in the country. He was also deeply involved in NeuroCore's most advanced research projects, something we both shared a passion for. It was clear he had worked hard, and I admired him for it. As the night went on, Michael seemed more reflective, and after a pause, he finally told me something I hadn't known before. "Do you remember that graduation day? The one where I gave you the lilies?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, the memory of that day still fresh in my mind. "Of course. I always wondered why you seemed like you wanted to say something, but didn't." Michael chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I wanted to ask you out that day," he confessed. "I brought the bouquet of lilies for you," he confessed, his eyes searching mine for a reaction. "I knew they were your favorite flowers, but before you arrived at the graduation ceremony, Daniel and other teammate had already shown up. I told them I was planning to ask you out that day, during the ceremony, in front of everyone." I was taken aback. "Wait, you were going to ask me out?" He nodded. "But Daniel must have overheard my plan, because he was agitated that day, constantly trying to get you away from me. When you left early from the party with him, I missed my chance. I thought you two were together because of how close you seemed, especially after you hugged him when we won the competition." His words hit me like a wave of realization. I remembered the bouquet of lilies, the look on his face when Daniel pulled me away that day. Everything suddenly made sense. "I didn't know," I whispered. I stood there, stunned by the revelation. Michael had liked me all along, and I never knew. "Why didn't you say anything later?" I asked softly. Michael sighed. "After that, I saw how focused you were on your work and achievements. When I found out about what happened with Daniel and everything you went through, I just admired you from afar. And then, after the global event, When I learned you were an heiress, I felt unworthy of you. I wasn't ready, but I knew I had to become someone worthy of standing by your side. So I worked even harder, became one of the top neurosurgeons in the country, leading research projects with NeuroCore. I did it all to prove to myself that I could be the man you deserved. My heart swelled at his words. Here was someone who had admired me for years, quietly supporting me without ever trying to overshadow me. He had respected my achievements and worked hard to better himself, not out of insecurity, but out of genuine admiration and love. Michael wasn't asking me to change or be less than who I was. He wanted to stand beside me as an equal. I smiled softly, realizing how much I had missed out on by not seeing him sooner. You've always been worthy, Michael. I just didn't know it back then. His eyes met mine, filled with hope. Do you think we could start over? Maybe this time, we can get it right. I took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, I'd like that. From that day on, we grew closer. Our relationship flourished as we supported each other's careers and shared our dreams for the future. Michael was everything I had been missing: kind, strong, understanding, and most of all, proud of who I was. We traveled together, worked on research projects, and shared our love for neurosurgery and life. Years later, we married in an intimate ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. It wasn't the grand affair that people expected for someone in my status, but it was perfect. My parents, who had always dreamed of seeing me happy, couldn't have been more thrilled. Together, we built a life full of love, respect, and shared success. Every day, I felt grateful to have someone who supported me, believed in me, and loved me unconditionally. And for the first time, I felt truly happy, knowing that I was with someone who not only loved me but celebrated every part of who I was. Together, we built a life filled with success, love, and happiness, a life I had always dreamed of. The chapter with Daniel was closed, and now a new one had begun. This time, I knew it would have the happy ending I had always deserved.